Under dim lights and distant applause, their names once filled rooms and headlines alike. Success followed them into stages, studios, battlefields, and bright screens. Then something shifted. Footsteps faded. Voices went quiet. What remained was uncertainty, silence, and a trail that seemed to end without warning or explanation. Let's uncover from spotlight to silence 5 people who mysteriously vanished. Story 1. In December of 1944, as World War II raged across Europe, the skies over the English Channel were thick with fog and uncertainty. Military aircraft moved constantly between England and France, carrying supplies, soldiers, and hope. On one quiet afternoon, a small plane lifted off from an English airfield. It never arrived at its destination. On board was one of the most famous musicians in the world, and after that moment, he was never seen again. Glenn Miller was born on March 1st, 1904, in Clarinda, Iowa. By the late 1930s, he had become the face of American swing music. His orchestra dominated the airwaves with songs like In the Mood, Moonlight Serenade, and Chattanooga Choo Choo. His sound was instantly recognizable, smooth, emotional, and unmistakably American. At the height of his fame, Miller made a surprising decision. Instead of continuing his wildly successful civilian career, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces. He believed music could serve a greater purpose during wartime. Commissioned as a major, Miller formed and led the Army Air Forces Band, performing for Allied troops across Europe to boost morale during some of the darkest days of the war. On December 15th, 1944, Miller boarded a small single-engine military aircraft in England. He was traveling ahead of his band to Paris, where he was scheduled to organize performances for American troops celebrating the liberation of France. The flight was unofficial. The weather was poor. Heavy clouds and freezing temperatures blanketed the English Channel. Still, the plane departed. It never arrived. At first, no alarms were raised. Wartime travel delays were common, and records were inconsistent. Days passed before it became clear that Glenn Miller's plane had vanished completely. No distress signal was received, no wreckage was found, no survivors were ever located. Search efforts were limited due to the ongoing Battle of the Bulge, one of the largest and bloodiest battles of the war. Military resources were stretched thin, and the disappearance of one aircraft, even one carrying a famous bandleader, was quickly overshadowed. Over the decades, theories emerged. Some suggested the plane encountered severe icing and crashed into the channel. Others believed it may have been caught in a routine Allied bombing jettison, accidentally struck by friendly aircraft, discarding unused bombs. A few even speculated about mechanical failure or navigational error. Despite countless investigations and renewed interest over the years, no physical evidence has ever been recovered. The English Channel has kept its silence. Glenn Miller was declared dead in 1944 at the age of 40. His wife, Helen, never remarried. His band continued to perform in his honor, and his music lived on far beyond the war. Today, Miller's songs remain timeless, still played at ceremonies, in films, and on radios around the world. For many, his music represents comfort, nostalgia, and resilience in the face of uncertainty. But for his family and admirers, the lack of answers remains a quiet ache. What if the truth of what happened in the skies that day was lost with the war itself? And what if Glenn Miller's final performance was one no one ever witnessed? Story 2. In the spring of 1970, the war in Southeast Asia spilled across borders, swallowing roads, villages, and lives. Cambodia had become a dangerous frontier where truth and rumor blurred together. On a dusty highway outside Phnom Penh, two journalists rode toward a checkpoint controlled by unseen forces. They carried cameras, not weapons, and after that moment, they were never seen again. Sean Flynn was born on May 31, 1941, into Hollywood royalty. He was the only son of legendary actor Errol Flynn and French actress Lily Demita. But unlike his father, Sean never felt at home in the spotlight. He tried acting briefly, appearing in films during the early 1960s, including The Son of Captain Blood. Yet the world of fame left him restless, seeking purpose. Flynn turned away from the cinema and toward something far more dangerous: war photography. By the mid-1960s, Flynn had reinvented himself as a freelance photojournalist. Working for Time, Paris Match, and United Press International, he embedded with soldiers in Vietnam, often venturing into combat zones most reporters avoided. He carried a camera, but also a reputation for fearlessness. Those who knew him said he chased stories the way others chased safety. On April 6, 1970, Flynn was in Cambodia, covering the widening conflict. Alongside fellow photojournalist Dana Stone, he set out from Phnom Penh towards Saigon, while other reporters traveled in protected convoys. Flynn and Stone chose motorcycles, faster, riskier, and closer to the action. Along Highway 1, they encountered a makeshift checkpoint reportedly controlled by communist guerrillas. Witnesses later recalled seeing the two men stop, speak briefly with armed figures, and then be escorted into a wooded area off the road. That was the last confirmed sighting of Sean Flynn. No radio message was sent, no bodies were recovered, no official report explained what happened next. In the chaotic months that followed, information was scarce. Cambodia was collapsing into civil war, and dozens of journalists were already missing or dead. Reports surfaced that Flynn and Stone had been captured by the Viet Cong and later transferred to the Khmer Rouge. Some accounts claimed they were held for months before being executed. Others suggested they died shortly after capture. Despite numerous investigations, no remains were ever identified as theirs. In 2010, a possible burial site was excavated in Cambodia, but DNA testing ruled out Flynn. The truth, like so many wartime disappearances, remained buried beneath years of conflict and silence. Flynn's mother, Lily Demita, spent years searching for answers. She financed private investigations, followed leads across Southeast Asia, and never stopped hoping her son might still be alive. In 1984, 14 years after his disappearance, she had Sean legally declared dead. She died a decade later without ever learning what truly happened to him. Friends described Flynn as restless but compassionate, driven by curiosity rather than fame. He left behind thousands of photographs, fragments of a life spent documenting truth in the world's most dangerous places. What if Flynn's final photographs revealed something he was never meant to capture? And what if the truth of his fate is still buried somewhere along that forgotten road? Story 3. In the spring of 1974, a controversial writer and outspoken activist crossed into Mexico seeking distance, clarity, and perhaps escape. He was known for living loudly, challenging authority, and pushing every boundary he touched. Then, during a trip along the coast of Mazatlan, he made a final phone call and vanished without a trace. Oscar Zeta Acosta was born in 1935 in El Paso, Texas, to Mexican immigrant parents. Raised in California, he grew up navigating racial divisions that would later define his life's work. After serving in the U.S. Air Force, he earned a law degree and became a lawyer for underserved communities in East Los Angeles. Acosta quickly gained a reputation as a fierce advocate for Chicano rights. He defended activists, challenged police practices, and became deeply involved in the Chicano movement of the late 1960s. His courtroom appearances were legendary, loud, confrontational, and unapologetically political. But Acosta was also a writer. In 1972, he published the autobiography of a brown buffalo, followed by The Revolt of the Cockroach People. The books blended fiction, autobiography, and social critique, capturing the anger and identity struggles of a generation. His work made him a cult figure, admired, controversial, and impossible to categorize. He was also the real-life inspiration for Dr. Gonzo in Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a friendship that brought both notoriety and tension. In May 1974, Acosta traveled to Mazatlan, Mexico. Friends said he was restless and searching for direction. He had recently stepped away from law and was drifting between writing projects and personal struggles. His final confirmed contact was a phone call to his son, Marco. During the call, Acosta reportedly said he was about to get on a boat full of white snow, a phrase that has been interpreted in different ways ever since. After that call, he was never seen again. No witnesses came forward. No body was found. No official investigation produced answers. Mexican authorities offered little information, and the case quietly went cold. Because of Acosta's outspoken politics and associations, speculation followed immediately. Some believed he may have been killed during a dispute involving drugs or criminal organizations operating near the coast. Others suggested he may have overdosed or suffered a mental breakdown while traveling alone. Hunter S. Thompson later wrote that he believed Acosta was either murdered or intentionally silenced, possibly due to his political activities. Still, others proposed that Acosta, who had long spoken of escape and reinvention, may have attempted to disappear intentionally. No physical evidence ever confirmed any theory. In 1986, 12 years after he vanished, Oscar Zeta Acosta was legally declared dead. Acosta's disappearance devastated his family. His son spent years searching for answers, holding on to hope long after official efforts ended. Friends and fellow activists continued to debate what happened, but closure never came. Though his body was never recovered, Acosta's voice survived through his writing. His books became cornerstones of Chicano literature, studied in universities and rediscovered by new generations seeking identity and justice. To many, Acosta became a symbol, not just of rebellion, but of the cost of living on the edge of conviction. Did Oscar Zeta Acosta cross paths with the wrong people during his final days in Mexico? Or did he disappear intentionally, leaving behind a life he no longer wanted to live? Story 4. In the summer of 1974, a woman quietly packed her belongings into a small car, wrote a handful of letters, and left without telling anyone where she was going. There was no struggle, no alarm, no sign of distress, only words left behind, thoughtful, careful, and final. Then, without a trace, Connie Converse disappeared. Elizabeth Connie Converse was born in 1924 in New Hampshire, the middle child of a strict Baptist family. Brilliant from an early age, she was valedictorian of her high school class and earned a scholarship to Mount Holyoke College. But academia could not hold her curiosity for long. In the early 1950s, she moved to New York City and began writing deeply personal songs, introspective, emotional, and far ahead of their time. With only her guitar and her voice, she created music that predated the singer-songwriter movement by a decade. Though she performed occasionally and even appeared once on national television, commercial success never came. Her music, quiet and confessional, didn't fit the era. By the early 1960s, discouraged and financially strained, she left New York and moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan. There, she worked as an editor and researcher, becoming deeply involved in political writing and social activism. Friends described her as intelligent, private, and increasingly withdrawn. Over time, depression and disillusionment appeared to weigh heavily on her. By 1974, Connie's life had narrowed. Her job had ended, her health had declined, and she felt disconnected from the world she once tried so hard to belong to. In August of that year, just days after her 50th birthday, she wrote letters to friends and family. They were not dramatic, they were calm, reflective, and oddly gentle. In one letter, she wrote, "Let me go, let me be if I can, let me not be if I can't." She asked that no one search for her. She thanked those who had helped her. She left instructions for handling her belongings. Then she packed her Volkswagen Beetle and drove away. She never contacted anyone again. There was no formal investigation. No missing persons report was filed at the time. Connie had made it clear that she wanted to disappear, and authorities had little reason to believe a crime had occurred. Over the years, theories emerged. Some believe she intentionally started a new life under a different name, seeking peace and anonymity. Others suspect she may have taken her own life, overwhelmed by years of isolation and disappointment. A few have suggested she may have lived quietly somewhere in the Midwest or Southwest, unnoticed and unknown. There was one unconfirmed report years later of someone with her name appearing in a phone directory in another state, but it was never verified. No evidence ever surfaced. Nobody was found. No trace of her car was discovered. Connie's family eventually accepted that she did not want to be found. A private investigator was consulted years later, but even he advised that if she had chosen to disappear, it was her right. Decades passed. Then, in 2004, a recording of Connie's music resurfaced on a public radio broadcast. Listeners were stunned by its emotional depth and modern sound. Interest grew. More recordings were discovered. In 2009, her songs were finally released to the public. Only after her disappearance did Connie Converse find the audience she never had in life. Did Connie Converse find peace somewhere far from the world she left behind? Or did her quiet departure mark the final chapter of a life spent searching for belonging? Story 5. In December of 1939, a young woman walked out of her apartment in Brookline, Massachusetts, carrying only a small amount of cash and the weight of an uncertain future. She did not leave a note. She did not say goodbye, and she never returned. Her name was Barbara Newhall Follett, once celebrated as a literary prodigy, now remembered as one of literature's most haunting disappearances. Barbara Newhall Follett was born in 1914 in New Hampshire to literary parents who recognized her brilliance early. By the age of 4, she was writing poetry. By 7, she had invented an entire imaginary world, complete with its own language. And by 12, she had written a novel. That novel, The House Without Windows, was published in 1927 to glowing reviews. Critics marveled at its sensitivity, imagination, and emotional depth. Barbara was hailed as a child genius, a writer far beyond her years. Her second book, The Voyage of the Normandy, followed soon after and confirmed her remarkable talent. But fame came with pressure. Her father, a literary editor who had championed her work, suddenly left the family for another woman. The abandonment devastated Barbara. Her creative world collapsed just as the Great Depression took hold, forcing her and her mother into financial hardship. Though she continued to write privately, publishers lost interest. The Prodigy faded from public view. In the early 1930s, Barbara married Nickerson Rogers, an outdoorsman who shared her love of nature. At first, the marriage seemed hopeful, but by 1939, cracks had formed. Friends later described Barbara as withdrawn, depressed, and emotionally exhausted. On December 7th, 1939, following an argument with her husband, Barbara left their apartment with roughly $30 in her pocket. She told no one where she was going. She was 25 years old. Days passed, then weeks. Her husband did not report her missing for 2 weeks. A formal missing persons report wasn't filed for 4 months, and even then, it was filed under her married name, ensuring it received little attention. Barbara was never seen again. There was no immediate investigation, no witnesses, no confirmed sightings, no evidence of a crime. Some believed Barbara had chosen to disappear intentionally, overwhelmed by emotional pain and a sense of failure. Others believed she may have taken her own life. Still others suggested she may have wandered off and died accidentally. Decades later, a researcher proposed that a woman found deceased in New Hampshire in 1948 may have been Barbara, misidentified at the time. The body was found near an area she once visited, and personal effects matched her description, but the theory remains unproven. No official conclusion was ever reached. Barbara's mother spent years pressing authorities to investigate further, convinced something had gone terribly wrong. She questioned why her son-in-law waited so long to report her missing and feared Barbara might be suffering from memory loss or institutionalized somewhere, unaware of who she was. But no answers ever came. Over time, Barbara's name faded from public memory until her writings were rediscovered decades later. Her novels, once forgotten, began to be read again. Critics noted the eerie parallels between her work and her disappearance. Many of her stories centered on escape, solitude, and vanishing into nature. In life, she had written about leaving the world behind. In death or disappearance, she did exactly that. Did Barbara Follett choose to vanish, seeking the freedom she had written about since childhood? Or did something happen to her that night that history never uncovered? 5 lives, 5 stories that began in the spotlight, on stages, in headlines, through words, music, and conviction. Each of them followed a path that placed them in public view, and then, without warning, led them into silence. They lived in the spotlight, admired, celebrated, watched by the world. Their voices were heard, their work remembered, their presence undeniable. And then, quietly, they slipped into silence. Some vanished while searching for the truth. Some while chasing meaning. Some while simply trying to escape the weight of who they had become. What unites them is not how they lived, but how they disappeared, leaving behind unanswered questions, unfinished stories, and echoes that still linger. From spotlight to silence, their paths remind us how fragile certainty can be. This is Vanished Stories, where the missing are never forgotten.